So I'm gonna do another video. This one is maybe different. It's basically um, explaining how I think about my career, how I think I've built it, and kind of the underlying philosophy to it. And so this might even have a title: "The Mythic Rise of an Unlikely Blue-Collar Auteur and Other Stories I Tell Myself in Order to Enjoy a Career in a Brutal Industry." So, talking about building and pursuing a screenwriting career is in a lot of ways useless. There's only so much advice that can be given or taken simply because there's so many variables. Plus, I'm sure there's advantages I enjoy as a straight white dude, not to mention my matinee idol, good looks, effortlessly charismatic personality. I have some advantages. So I can't really tell others how to approach their career, but I can try to explain my own thinking about my career for you to judge and or possibly adapt. My career, as far as I can tell, has been about authoring my own self-myth while also methodically building bridges to each new phase of my career. Right now, I'm not talking about art. I'm simply talking about how I've tried to make a living doing this while also maintaining some sense of purpose and fulfillment and sanity. So, my breaking in, it happened pretty suddenly, 10 years ago. And when it did, I wasn't thinking about myths or building bridges or anything else. I was mostly just bewildered to suddenly be working in Hollywood. That is, in my first couple years, I was in this state of stunned compliance. I was just happy to be here, which is perhaps understandable, but is not a practically efficacious operational self-orientation. That is, it wasn't a useful story to tell myself about myself. One of the harder things I've had to learn after breaking in was figuring out how to take ownership of my career in such a unstable industry. Which is a weird thing to say, maybe. I don't know if it's my temperament or class background or what, but I think I operated early on as if my screenwriting career was some gift bestowed upon me by mercurial gods and could be taken away just as quickly as it had been given. And that might actually be the case. Who knows? But either way, I think my attitude was, don't call attention to yourself. Just be silently grateful for whatever you get. Maybe this was learned by spending my teens and 20s in a series of jobs where I just had to shut up and take it. I don't know. But silent, passive, stunned gratitude isn't a practically effective approach to take regarding your own career, or it wasn't for me. I started gradually to realize this. I started to change my orientation towards my own career. And that's when my career started becoming less a source of constant anxiety and started getting closer to being a source of enjoyment and meaning. It also started going better. Now, this doesn't mean I suddenly stopped having failures. It just meant that I began creating a story for myself, a self-myth about why I was doing the things I was doing. It kind of changed everything for me. It gave me a context for all my actions. But first I had to figure out, what is the story I am telling myself about why I actually do what I do, screenwriting? Partially, this means, why am I even doing this? And I mean, for real. Not the altruistic, self-flattering reason I tell other people why I'm doing this, but the actual selfish reason that I know lurks deep down inside me. Am I doing this because I want to make money and have a better lifestyle? Am I doing this because I want the glory? Am I doing this because it feels good? Because I want people to think I'm special? Because I think it'll get me laid? These are all perfectly valid reasons, I think. So why am I, me, Tony Toast, doing this? I think I originally started writing because, one, it's the only thing I've ever been exceptional at, and two, I have a great big emptiness inside me that I'm kind of desperate to fill. So, self-myth time. In the 1990s, I was a fat, depressed 18-year-old virgin living in a trailer park and working at a pickle factory. Then Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Tarantino, and Spike Lee all sort of hit me at the same time. And this early 90s cultural wave pointed a way to me to get out of my frankly unbearable existence. Basically, early on, I wrote because I wanted to be someone else, literally. To be specific, I wanted to be Kurt Cobain or Quentin Tarantino. I wanted girls to notice me. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to be special. I started taking creative writing classes at a community college, and I discovered I was actually better at writing than everyone around me. So my first sense of feeling visible or even having self-worth came through writing. Not just through writing, but from getting recognized by my teachers and peers as a uniquely gifted writer. It's sort of carried through my adult life. And my thought is this: I can't really separate my writing career from what I'm hoping in my heart of hearts my writing will do for me. My deepest wish has been for my writing to give me the sense of identity and self-worth that I frankly wouldn't have otherwise. Okay, so that's my baseline. Now, talent exists, but whatever talent I possess can't be disassociated from this gnawing, insatiable, empty feeling. It's probably why I write compulsively. I have to write just about every day. Otherwise, I start to wonder if I even exist. Now, I also like money. I also like the process. I like collaborating. I like making things. But I think I'm mostly doing this because it gives me an identity, both to myself and to others. Writing is my primary tether to my own existence. In fact, writing is my argument to the cosmos that I deserve to exist. This is going to be too much information, but since I was told at the age of 9 that I was conceived in a sexual assault, I struggled off and on with guilt and shame about even existing. So I can't really advise anyone else about how to think about their screenwriting career because I don't know what's truly motivating you or what holes you're trying to fill along the way. I don't know what you're expecting your writing to do for you. When I started writing, I desperately wanted to become the next Quentin Tarantino or maybe Orson Welles. I wanted to be a young genius in the world. That ship's kind of sailed by now. I'm a middle-aged guy now. But I still have pretty grand ambitions, and if I was to be honest, these days, I want to have Taylor Sheridan's career. Now, I don't actually want to be him. I don't know what he's like. Maybe he's a miserable bastard, maybe not, I don't know. I've got a beautiful marriage to a great wife, 2 amazing sons, got a great dog. We live in a nice house. I can afford to buy Blu-rays and order UFC pay-per-views and take out food kind of whenever I want. I don't actually want to be someone else anymore. I actually managed to write my way into a new identity and a new life, and I really quite enjoy all. So thankfully, I'm not operating from the same drowning existential despair as in my teens and 20s, which means I'm not placing the same psychic demand on my writing to give me a reason to keep living, which is good for my career. Also probably just good in general. But my ability to contribute positively to my marriage and to be a good enough dad to my sons is probably still inextricable from the sense of identity and security that my writing career has brought me. If I suddenly couldn't write, or even if I was suddenly not seen as a writer, I know I'd become a worse husband and dad. But I'm also not at a spot where I'm thinking, okay, I just want to stay in this place and cruise around for the next 20 years. I've done some cool shit. I've written and published 3 books. I've created and run my own TV show, written and produced plenty of other TV, been paid to write some pretty great feature scripts that I still think would make great movies, and might still someday. I'm proud of all that. But to be honest, it's not enough for me. I want more. If my career ended today, I'd kind of be bitter about it. I mean, I'd say I was grateful. It's a great opportunity. Maybe someday I'd believe it, but I'd be kind of pissed because I know I can do bigger and better than I have already. So when I say I'm aiming for something like Taylor Sheridan's career, it doesn't necessarily mean that I want to have the biggest show on cable like Yellowstone, though I certainly wouldn't mind. What I mean is, I want to write and direct my own rural, muscular material for both TV and film, ideally with the sorts of budgets and casts that Taylor Sheridan now works with. And I'm not there yet. I'm still gathering materials to build the bridge to get me to there. Now, no one gave Taylor Sheridan those casts and budgets. He wrote his way to them, which is why I admire what he's done so much. He wrote Sicario and Hell or High Water on spec for free. Those are 2 fantastic fucking films. And those 2 films made him a named screenwriter. But he didn't rest at that or just repeat it. or just repeat it. He used his new industry buzz as a bridge. He parlayed his hot writer status into Wind River, which he wrote and directed himself on a modest budget. Wind River established Sheridan as someone who could capably direct his own material. It was well received, it made some money, so Sheridan parlayed that into writing and directing Yellowstone. And the massive success of Yellowstone and his previous track record has led Sheridan to now having an even bigger budget and bigger stars for his next film starring Angelina Jolie. Bridge to bridge to bridge. And if I had to guess, based solely on what he's done so far, Taylor Sheridan should be able to command the budgets and talent to write and direct some version of whatever he wants for the next 20 years. I mean, within limits. And to be blunt, I want my version of that. In my own kind of quiet way, I've kind of been making my case as, the plan B Taylor Sheridan already. I mean, what is Wind River but a film-length Longmire episode with a bigger budget and bigger names? But I still need to build the rest of the bridge from where I am now. That is, a working screenwriter without name recognition, but with, I think, a good rep as a blue-collar writer in some Hollywood circles. And to get to where I want to be, which is someone who can credibly write and direct his own muscular, blue-collar, flyover state stories and gain access to the sorts of budgets and collaborators that'll help get those stories to a large enough audience that I can keep writing and directing this sort of shit for another 20 plus years. Now, underlying all this is that old gnawing need to have an identity. And there's this big mythic identity I'm building for myself in place of that, to see myself and to be seen as a kind of blue-collar auteur, a working-class poet of muscularity and soulfulness who beat the odds, who now tells stories about his blue-collar flyover tribe, primarily for that tribe. That's my in-progress self-myth. I feel like I know myself pretty well by now. So I also know I need a daily sense of feeling like a notable writer to keep me from cartwheeling down some inner embankment. So I have to prop up that daily self while also trying to build this mythic self, and it's a process. And that brings me to my whole bridges and materials metaphor. I think I do know exactly where I am right now, and exactly where I want to get to, and what I need to keep myself going on a day-to-day basis to bridge the space in between those two spots. I think that gives me a huge advantage in an industry that's full of confusion and misdirection and desperation. I've got a story. It's got a spine. Let's get to it. So career-wise, I now divide my projects into two camps. One, projects that can be direct bridges to my mythic blue-collar writer-director self. Or two, projects that can help me gather materials to build that bridge. And that's it. If a project doesn't fall into one of those two camps, I'm not interested in it. Not right now. At this point of my career, a potential big paycheck wouldn't lure me to try and pitch on, say, a Marvel movie. Nothing wrong with MCU films, I guess, but I'm not in this for the payday. I'm in this to fill the big, yawning inner void by forging myself into this mythic blue-collar storytelling auteur. Getting rich on a Marvel movie or whatever won't help me do that. But writing and directing my own Hell or High Water, or A Perfect World, or 3 Billboards, or creating and running and directing my own Justified or Yellowstone, man, maybe that would. Or at least that's a story I keep telling myself. And as a believer of the power of myths, right now, just believing in that story, it's good enough for me. And to be honest, now that I'm 10 years into my career, I'm only now, right now, at a place where I think I can credibly build a bridge from where I'm at in the industry now to actually attempting my version of the blue-collar writer-director auteur thing. It took me 10 years to get to this spot. And if I do get myself in a position to write and direct my first film, 90% likely it's going to be some variation on the Western. Most likely a modern-day one, lower budgets. Also more likely to be greenlit. Just simply because, well, I love that genre, but that's the iconography I worked in for most of my TV career. So if I'm going to make the leap from writer to director, I don't think I should also be suddenly trying to make a leap into a new genre. Just, one reinvention at a time is good enough. And so maybe that's a repeated motto for me. Dream big while putting my energies into a jump I can actually make right now. then enjoy that new landing spot, but also think about it as a place to gather new materials for my next jump. And by materials, I mean new skills, new relationships, maybe a new uptick in status or buzz in the industry based on the quality or marketability of my new project, or simply a new sample that can better show the industry what I'm capable of doing. Then all these materials can then become the basis of a new bridge to a new project, or to a new genre, or a new phase of my career. Sometimes I'm just buying myself time or paying this month's bills, but if I'm not gathering bridge building materials in the process, I'm also probably burning out. Now, my first bridge was actually poems. Poems got me out of working manual labor and customer service jobs and into an MFA program when I couldn't afford film school. Poems also, for a while, satisfied my psychic need to feel like a writer. Then the next decade was just a series of small bridges. My poetry MFA thesis got published by University Press and won this thing called the Walt Whitman Award. That got me a more secure writerly identity and more confidence. With that more confidence, I started an online poetry journal with a poetry buddy. I also started engaging with a larger poetry community. I started writing literary criticism. But I was also, after my MFA, stuck in customer service type work. I was working in a coffee shop and also counting traffic for the city of Chapel Hill. And I needed a bridge out to do more writing. And so then my book that won the award and my criticism and my editing and everything, that ended up being the bridge that got me into Duke's PhD program. And that bought me more time to write. It also gave me some semi-elite credentials. And as a semi-elite PhD student with a first book award and a poetry journal, I published a second book with Iowa's University Press. And I gradually gained intellectual confidence. I didn't feel as much like a illiterate hick anymore. I also realized I was getting tired of academia. It felt kind of empty and a little bit useless to me. It didn't fill my big empty psyche spaces like I was hoping. But I had more materials at the end of my PhD time. So my award-winning poetry identity and my semi-elite PhD lit crit chops and my blue-collar background helped me successfully pitch a book about Johnny Cash. And I wrote that book, and it got published. I finished my dissertation. And then my 3 books and my semi-elite doctoral degree and my poetry profile and years of teaching in grad school, that became my bridge to a creative writing professor gig. So each bridge led me to new materials to gather, which led to a more ambitious bridge, which led to gathering more materials. Now at this point, I was 35. I wasn't super sure where I was going next. Most likely I was going to try to build a bridge to becoming a sort of rural noir crime novelist. But then, unexpectedly, an MFA pal of mine broke in as a TV writer. So I wrote a script called Tangle Eye. And that script, along with my sort of unusual profile as this trailer park kid who also was an award-winning poet with a PhD, plus my friendship with my pal, became my bridge to a couple of Hollywood agents. Then my agents and my Tangle Eye script became my bridge to getting hired as a freelancer for Longmire. And on that show, I learned how to actually write for TV and then how to prep and produce my own episodes. Amazing bridge-building materials. And after a couple years on Longmire and developing pilots with studios, I knew I didn't want to stay where I was. I was making money and enjoying myself, but writing for Longmire also meant writing in someone else's voice. Plus, at this point, I basically just wanted to have more creative control because, somewhat arrogantly, I believed I could create better work if I was the one who had the final word on things, and because, honestly, I wanted the daily feeling of being the big shot in charge. And so, again, writing equals identity for me. And so to not go spiraling off, I have to find ways to maintain that writerly identity almost on a daily basis. And that's probably as much of a motivation for giving this occasional unsolicited screenwriting advice as anything altruistic. I have a little bit of a needy psyche, I think. Anyway, while I was working on Longmire, I knew that simply plugging away at being a good writer on someone else's show wasn't going to be a bridge to where I wanted to go next, which was creating and running my own show. So while writing on Longmire, I also wrote 2 episodes of Damnation. I wrote them on my own, for free and in secret, because at that time, It was the only way I knew how to write fully in my own voice. And I believed that writing in my own voice was the best way to create a bridge from being a staff writer to becoming a showrunner. I believed in myself as a writer. And luckily I was right. It took a couple of years to get it on the air, but those damnation scripts led me to selling and show running my own show. And so now, I was no longer just a TV writer, I was now a showrunner. New phase of my career, which is obviously a pretty fucking awesome opportunity, but it also placed me in new territory where I could gather new materials and try to build even more ambitious bridges than before. So one new bridge was, I didn't want to just be in TV, I also wanted to have a features career. I still had my writer-director ambitions in the back of my head. And I had a lot of TV bridge building materials at this point in my career, but I didn't have any features ones other than the ability to write scripts, plus a degree of self-knowledge about my strengths and weaknesses and what sorts of processes got in the way of my best work. So with just those materials in hand, how could I build a bridge from being a TV writer to becoming a features writer? Well, in the process of pitching Damnation, my manager approached me about possibly adapting an Olympic rower's memoir into a feature script. He told me there were two ways we could do it. We could, one, go out and try to find someone to pay me to write it and develop the script with them, or two, I could write it on my own for free, but fully in my own voice with my creative control. And I chose door number two. Practically, I could do this because Lallmeyer was already paying half my bills. My wife's professor job was paying the other half. But I also knew that each leap forward in my career had happened via a script written for free, without any meddling, done totally in my own voice. So here's a pattern. Every time I've wanted to build a bridge to the next phase of my career, the way I've done it is by writing a script on spec, meaning for free, on my own, in my own voice, in my own chosen genre, with my own chosen subject matter. But it's never been just any old script, written just to be sold or even just to be made. Each spec script that I've written that's changed my career was specifically written to change my career, to be a direct bridge from where I currently stood to the next phase of my career. And that's not the only reason each script was written. I try not to write anything that I don't 100% believe in. I'm just simply not good enough to cynically write something without any emotional or psychological skin in the game and have it come out good. But there was also always a strategic reason why I wrote each spec script when I did with that specific subject matter. It was all about building a bridge, linking the distance between where I was in my career at that time and where I wanted to go next. To break in as a TV writer, I wrote an original pilot fusing the Western genre with my small town upbringing and poetic sensibilities. That got me a job writing on a blue-collar crime show that was also a modern-day Western. So when I decided to try and create and sell and run my own TV show, it's no coincidence that it was also a blue-collar neo-Western. It was the most credible bridge I could build from where I stood at that time. When I wanted to break into features, I didn't go around town trying to randomly score an open writing assignment. I wrote a blue-collar sports story because I believed that having a script fully in my own voice, circulating around town, would do more for my career than anything else. Plus, after defining myself almost exclusively to anyone paying attention as a guy who specialized in blue-collar crime stories with a sort of neo-Western Eastwood bent, it felt, after 5+ years, like a good time to show that, I could actually write other genres as well. I kind of waited to expand my writerly identity until I kind of felt pretty established in one identity already. So anyways, I ended up writing this blue-collar sports feature script for free with total creative control. I got really helpful input from my manager in the management company. And I called that script The Olympian. And it got passed around town like crazy. And it tied for second place on the Blacklist about 5 years ago. Blacklist being, they go around asking industry people, what's the best unproduced movie script you've read this year? And they tally up the score. Mine tied for second place for getting the most votes in the industry. So anyways, a good thing. And that script has led to a run of paid feature writing gigs for me that I'm still on. And it's still probably my main calling card around town. That is, that script has gotten me the most meetings and the most industry fans. And largely, I think it's because it was written in a different voice than most sports stories are. I couldn't have written it like that if it was developed with an executive. And I think my script moved people. It's about a blue-collar rower who takes on the entire elite rowing establishment in order to prove his greatness, largely so he can justify his own existence to himself. Basically, the script is a spiritual autobiography masquerading as a sports biopic. So, this spec script served me well in a way that a studio developed one wouldn't. Plus, I ended up getting paid for it anyway, a few years later, for several times more money than I would have gotten before. So, it really worked out well. And hopefully, it'll get made. A lot of working writers refuse to write unless they're getting paid ahead of time. I get that. I have a different approach. My strongest attribute is my writing voice. So when I want to push my career to its next phase, the best investment I can make is taking time to write something fully in that voice. That doesn't mean I'm going around writing shit for free willy-nilly, though. My attitude is this. I will write something for free, but only if I think it'll be the main bridge to the next phase of my career. So when I've thought a spec script would help me jump from staff writer to showrunner, damnation, or from TV into features, The Olympian, or from screenwriter to writer-director, to be announced, I've very happily written it for free, on my own. But it's all dependent on where I was standing at the time, and what bridge I imagined I needed to build and cross next. So at this point in my career, I won't write a TV pilot script for someone else for free. I've already established myself as a showrunner. I don't need that bridge right now. Same reason why I'll no longer write a feature script on spec for someone else to direct. I don't need that bridge either. So what will I write on spec for free? I will write a feature script for me to direct, or an original pilot for a show I would run based on my own original idea or on a property I have optioned and control myself, with the underlying goal of directing some of the episodes myself. That's it. So what projects will I do for pay right now? Well, first of all, I have to be excited about them creatively. This could be because of the content or the genre or the people I'd be working with or my spin on the story, or hopefully some combo of the above. The project also needs to somehow feed this myth I'm telling myself about my own career. So I will say yes to a project or chase after it if both A, I'm passionate about it, and B, I think it'll get me closer to writing and directing my own scripts. And that's it. That is, if a script will help me gather materials for a next big bridge I want to cross. Materials can be a lot of things. On a basic level, I'll chase a straight writing gig still, if I think it'll lead me to writing a script so fucking good and vital that it will be rocket fuel for my career going forward. Basically, if I think, well, this could be my Hell or High Water, or this could be my Sicario, yeah, I'll chase that writing gig, because if I can string a couple of those together, then suddenly trying to make my own Wind River becomes a much more viable proposition. And there's other ways of gathering materials. I took a step backwards in my career in a lot of ways, from being a showrunner in order to be a co-EP, a co-executive producer on The Terror Infamy. Partly, I had bills to pay, and that would pay the bills for the year. Plus, I missed being involved in making TV. The inner embankment was getting a little slippery. But also, I dug the subject matter, I liked the pilot script, and I liked the showrunner. It would also be a chance for me to break into horror, a genre I hadn't worked in before, without having to create and pitch and sell an entire horror series myself. And the people involved in The Terror Infamy, cast, crew, writers, directors, couldn't have been better people. Awesome individuals, up and down the whole thing, and kind of drove me crazy to not be in creative control. Which was on me. I signed on to support someone else's vision. I knew that up front, but I underestimated my appetite for creative control. Something about me, creatively, I have no lack of confidence. I'm also kind of obsessive, sort of tireless. And as a showrunner and feature writer, those are very useful matrix of qualities. But as a co-EP, as one of two people supporting the showrunner, sort of think I was always on the verge of being a nuisance to everyone. I'm sure I went past verging on some occasions, but hopefully politely. And when I got to the height of my own frustration, born out of the gig being exactly what it was advertised to be, again, on me, I told myself a new story. Here's a chance to gather new materials. The specific materials were improving my chops as an on-set producer and in post-production. So once I shifted my orientation, my story to that, my frustration seeped away. I reined in my obsessiveness, and I enjoyed my wonderful and talented cohorts again. And an added bonus, I actually got better at working creatively on set with cast and crew, and I developed a deeper understanding of editing. So when I hopefully make the next jump to directing my own scripts, I'll be drawing upon exactly these skills, these materials I refined on the Terror Infamy. So I guess that's how I think about my career. I think about this bigger self-myth I'm actively creating for myself in my choice of projects and what materials I'm gathering up along the way. I also try to tend to the less glorious day-to-day story of being this person whose sense of his own existence and self-worth is inescapably tied up with his identity and daily practice as a writer. And then here's the kicker. All of the above that I've been talking about, it could very well be bullshit. I could have the career that I have right now sheerly out of total chance. It could have been mostly random good luck or bad luck guiding my career so far, regardless of any of this myth and bridges shit. But I don't think it matters. What matters is that I believe that I'm creating my mythic self. And that means I take total responsibility for the good and bad of my career. It also means that I fold each failure or victory or neutral draw into this myth of the unlikely rise of a blue-collar auteur. And this self-myth keeps me going. It supplies me with meaning and direction. It gives me a through line I can return to when deciding what projects to chase or what projects to write on spec or what opportunities to politely decline. So when I find myself in a state of frustration or depression, I reorient myself so I can gather materials to build a bridge to the next phase of this myth. I see a lot of writers who seem to have almost trained themselves to passively hope for the best, or randomly chase projects, or randomly choose what to write, or sort of maybe roll their eyes at the powers that be, like they're teenagers wishing mom and dad would up their allowance or let them take the car or something. I used to do those things too, but they were all feeding into the story of a writer who was powerless to write out his own story or determine the course of his own career. It wasn't the story of someone actively building bridges, however modest, to the next step in his career. So this unlikely rise of the blue-collar auteur self-myth I've created for myself could be 100% bullshit, and it may never come to fruition. But if it's keeping my head above water and driving me to a richer, more fulfilling experience of my own career, then it's a make-believe story that's better than the truth. Okay, so that was my video this time. Thank you for listening, and good luck.